Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
Right, this is another episode, Thorin's Rotations, because, you know what? Take that, Mom. The whole world does revolve around me. So, sometimes in interviews, I used to say that as a joke, right? And because as usual, Crumbz knows this, one of my problems is sometimes my persona is the curse of it is it's too successful and people actually believe that I'm not even joking on half this shit. So in an interview, right, I once said, just because someone was asking, why do you always trash talk and why are you so confident? So just to banter them, I said, I'm when you're a kid and your parents tell you oh yeah, you're really special, you're a unique, but, and then when you get a bit older, they tell you well, calm down, you're not really, I was I just stopped listening before that, I only heard the first thing, so, I've just run with it, so okay. Obviously, Crumbz, co-host for this one, talking LCS. Our guest for this one is Nelson. He's from Singapore, but he works in the LPL. He works for LNG, which, listen, there's a million teams in the LPL, so just go check out if you want to see what they're about. Now, listen, Nelson, it's not actually that common, as far as I know, that people who follow the LPL follow the LCS, right? Usually, if you're going to follow something, it'd be LCK or LEC, right?
Yeah, I think most of them, they just watch LCK. Especially the coaches or the players in China.
Sure. Thing that... Yeah, go on.
It just happens that I'm from an English-speaking country, so you just watch LCS and LEC more.
Exactly. That's why you're the OP.
Yeah, nice.
Person from that region of the world, mate.
Knowledge nobody else is looking at. You've got it.
There you go. Just don't make the same mistake that Papa Smithy did and think that having knowledge of your particular region means you can import a really bad mid laner and then just... Oh, sorry, I was getting into a whole thing there, Crumbz. Put that to one side. What was I doing? That was for off camera. Yeah, exactly. Love Papa Smithy. Great guy. Actually do. That's not even a joke, but whatever. For the purpose of the persona, yeah, a snide way of saying it. Right, we're going to talk LCS on this one. I'm just going to warn everyone at the top. I know everyone gets really upset, right, when people flame LCS and they flame the NA teams or they flame the fact that they're going to do badly at Worlds. And I get it, right, because I personally think there have been teams and times in the past where, yes, listen, the whole region could never compete with the Asian regions. But there's definitely been times where there was one or two teams that I did think were good. You know what? Even though they never made it, I did think that super dominant, Season 6 TSM, I thought they could have done some things, actually. I thought they had some really strong players. I actually even think Team Liquid last year, I thought they were underrated because what I liked was that they had that sort of brick wall style where you just unless you were more skilled than them, you just couldn't break them down. It even worked against fucking IG. But I will say this, I'm fully on board with that narrative at the moment, Crumbz. The way that these playoffs went, I don't know how you could take pride in this. I'm not even joking. This might sound harsh, but if I was TSM, I wouldn't get that crazy about having won this set of matches. Look how many best of fives all the way to game 5. Look how many fiestas. Look how many times the other team was beating them and then basically just said, you know what? Actually, you can just win this match. It's one thing if you beat the guy and you take the win from him. If the other guy just sort of self-implodes and you just don't and you win, it doesn't feel as cool. So I have to say, even though we've got some okay teams, from Cloud9 dropping onwards, I do feel kind of dire about this mix of teams, Crumbz. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, obviously losing Cloud9 was a big heartbreak because everybody wanted to see how well they're going to do. But I don't feel as bad as you do because I'm looking at Worlds and I'm thinking every year was shit, right? Every year was just, to me, was always disappointing. No matter how far Cloud9 went, it almost even felt like teams got there out of a fluke in games, fluke in the bracket. When C9 makes it and they're up against Fnatic, you're let's see, and then get completely obliterated. That doesn't feel good. So I never felt like we actually had anything going for Worlds. My disappointment was always there. This time, though, I feel really good because I know that the teams are shit. Right? I know that we're sending not the best things that we get.
Where's he going with this? Come on.
The two best teams had to play more games than anybody. We gave them the most practice possible.
Right. This was the NA boot camp.
The format gave them everything they could possibly want, and the Worlds happens a little bit closer than to the other years. So, in theory, this should be the year where our teams are most prepared compared to the other years.
I'll put it this way, I get what you're saying, because, for example, I already reached out to people for interviews in boot camps, and they were like, oh, I'm leaving tomorrow to Worlds. What? Fuck it. Normally you have weeks, sometimes a month if you're one of the regions that ends early. Nelson, What's your sense for where NA is at? What's your take on that? Like the group of teams, overall the playoffs, what was your feeling for it?
I mean, I think like TSM has the best idea on how to play the current meta, like from the van pick and how they play the mid game, and how they play jungle especially. But I feel like the rest of the teams, they're just not really sure what they're doing actually.
You know what upsets me, Nelson, is that since day one of this year, I told myself, I saw how brilliant LPL was. I'm going to watch a lot of LPL. I want to see what they're doing, what they're about. And ever since I saw the variation in champions in the LCS, I've been saying, you need to play carries top. You need to play carries in the jungle all year long.
Dude, we were saying that earlier on when we were having the episode with Empire from Evil Geniuses. Like, like why isn't Licorice playing carries? Like, why isn't somebody on all the carries? Yeah, you have been preaching that.
And then suddenly, for some reason, like here comes the end of summer at finals. People are like, yeah, maybe you should play carries top. Like, these are never revolutionary ideas. It's just somebody else that's better is doing it. Why does it take so long to copy it?
I mean, it's like, why don't you see like Quinn or Jace against Renekton? I'm not sure why you don't actually see that matchup in NA.
Yeah,
it's common in LPL. If people don't know, that's like a standard a decision to go into that. Yeah.
I don't know how it is over there, but here I feel like a lot of it comes down to the practice you get in solo queue. Nobody's really playing these champions in solo queue in the first place, so they never get to the stage. Like your top lane is just not playing carries in high-low solo queue. That's just what happens.
What is it? Just like Gnar and Maokai and shit? What do they play?
Well, I mean, you've got your occasional like Jaxes and shit, but you almost always have people cheesing some weird shit. It's like, here's Tryndamere, here's Darius, here's like a Teemo, here's like these other picks that are just so lane dominant with an
holy shit,
or whatever it is.
Wait a minute. So people are playing Teemo and Tryndamere in like Challenger and fucking NA.
Yeah.
Oh, give me a break. Just give me a break.
There's a Teemo Challenger jungler.
I mean, it's the same in Korean solo queue as well, unless they are like at the very top. I think it's the same throughout the world actually. It's just that you can just practice the matchups in scrims, you know.
Right. Because that's one thing, by the way. Let's just start there. Here's the thing. If everyone knows my shows, this is why it's perfectly suited to have Crumbz as a co-host, is we don't just go like, right, and then we're going to talk about this match only, and then we go into this. It's like, we just go wherever we want. The conversation goes where it goes. So I'll say this. Let's start out on this topic. So you already addressed it there. One of the interesting things to me was that this format, which we never had, obviously, in NA until this year, had this factor where in TSM it was extreme because they lost in the first round, so they played the whole lower bracket. They played so many best of threes. I don't think people get it. They played something like twice as many as Team Liquid and FlyQuest and these, and then even more than FlyQuest, obviously loads more. So as a result, when you consider, it's always been, think about the Worlds analogy. The whole reason why Worlds is basically impossible to predict is because you're going off what happened 2 months earlier in like 3 patches earlier in one region, and then you're putting all the regions together on a different patch after they've all played basically at what we call in English a black box environment where you don't know what was going on in their scrims. And for all you know, as happens at every Worlds, there's like 5 new picks that we don't even know as super OP. And so we're all thinking that the team that has this comp or that, and we never know. So, dude, the playoffs felt like that. Like the TSM that lost the first series and then was looking like they were going to get eliminated by GGS. That TSM where they had treats and they still were trying to make double lift a carry and they had Broken Blade as the tank player. That TSM would never have won the LCS. Never. That's why one of the things I immediately thought when this final ended is, you know what? It was fun to meme on him when he was being an idiot. But actually, fucking, even though Bjergsen was obviously like the main carry because he 1v9'd, the sleeper carry was double lift. Like by the end of the tournament, he'd learned how to play Senna. His Ashe was actually competent. And in doing so, Broken Blade had all the carries. Now all of a sudden, they were actually a fucking like decent team.
I think it's more like he didn't really play with such a good top laner before, like mechanically skilled top laner. Because I mean, sure you have Impact, he's good, but he's not going to pick up like the.
He always had the weak side players, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like he's more experienced, so he should be more suited to play like weak side compared to Broken Blade.
I mean, I feel like a part of this playing weak side it's just that teams are not really looking out for the matchups that generate these kinds of weak side or strong side advantages. Like in NA, and I guess in LPL to a degree as well, it's been Camille against Ornn for so long. Like, people are quite familiar with the matchups that do well or poorly into Camille, what goes well into Mordekaiser. But when it comes to these carry champions, people still don't really know what beats what. That's why things like Lucian top are so surprising. They're like, oh, what do we play into this? Oh, should we just blind Ornn constantly? Oh, we're up against Twisted Fate and Camille. Should we take Jax or Gangplank? It's like, we've seen what this happens, how this matchup plays out for so long, yet it's still not there. So I do think that while Broken Blade has solid mechanics, the fact that there was nobody that was willing to take the skill matchups into the skill matchups and beat him with it, I think it's a big sign for where the region is lacking for carries top lane. Because that last game, if you pick Jax and you're a good Jax, you win right there. You have a super good matchup into Camille, and against Twisted Fate, you don't get stunned. You press E and you don't get stunned. Like, what more do you want?
Yeah, go on, mate. I was waiting for you to talk. I thought you were going to say something. Go on.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like teams didn't punish Bjergsen for blind picking his mid champions that much. Like, you can't blind pick Zilean or TF in LPL unless you like ban out the mid laners. But especially Zilean, because there are like so many corners, like Syndra, Orianna, Zoe, but no one can lane, in any.
Well, that's actually an area where Monty made a good point on Summoning Insight. He said, listen, as much as you might have enjoyed that, like Bjergsen doing all these great matches on Zilean, it's actually a terrible preview for Worlds because he will never be able to do that. Like, he wasn't just picking these matches, he was having priority in lane with these matchups. Like at that point in time, you can do anything you fucking want. If like no one ever punishes you, they never counterpick you, and then you just get with the losing matchup, you're winning in CS or going even. Like, you're not going to beat that team. Like, that's just stupid. That should be a draft win for you. When that, like, you have to realize if he goes against top esports and picks Zilean, they're loving that. They're going to be like, thank you, Bjergsen. Knight has every champion in the fucking game, so we'll just go ahead and pick one. There you go, you're fucked. Like, it's going to be really bad for Bjergsen if he does that. But it was amazing in playoffs, I can't lie.
I mean, they didn't think about, like, FlyQuest didn't think about, like, mid jungle as well. I see, like, every game they just pick no CC mid jungle, and Zilean is, like, just 1v2 every game.
Yeah, that's one area I'm really confused, actually. Listen, I know typically, Crumbz, like one of the things I always complain about the LCS coaches is they still do have like global meta thinking where they're more about like, I want this overall comp, and I want these. I'm not exaggerating. If I'd watched the rest of the playoffs and I'm the coaches of FlyQuest, my number one goal on the whiteboard is everything I'm doing is just to shut down and fuck up the game for Bjergsen. I just want to make the game really bad for Bjergsen. I want his laning phase to be terrible. I want to have ganks all the time. I want Ignar and Santorin just all the time in his lane, even if it's just to ruin his CS, mate. Like, if you did that, look at the way the playoffs went. The amount of times they relied on him to get fed and then carry the game. This is just silly. The other teams were playing like it was just another team with all the players are good or something.
Okay, so that's actually a perfect point. So it was all about ruining Bjergsen. The Golden Guardian series, he had 23 out of 25 bans against him, which should tell you like how much of a focus he was.
Yes.
Post playoffs, what did you guys think about the Bjergsen versus Jensen discussion? I know regular season, I think it was very heated, but I think post playoffs, I think it was really clear who stood out.
I mean,
what do you think, Nelson?
It's not easy to judge because like mid lane is 2 or 3 people. You have the jungler and support, and from what I can see, is like Bjergsen uses jungle better than Jensen, definitely.
Yeah, that's my problem, Crumbz. Listen, I've said this before as well. That's how long the playoffs were. When the playoffs began, Spicker was a meme who was going to be working in Burger King next year. I don't even lie now. He actually looks competent and he looked good in the clutch games. And at the end of the tournament, he had a bunch of champions he could play, including props to him for being able to play Nidalee. That is something no one else in the LCS basically could do. Like, I know Closer could do it, he just doesn't have the team to do it. So here's the problem I have, Crumbz. Even though I know to a Fnatic fan from the past 2 years, this will be an alien concept. Guys, as mad as this sounds, a complete rookie who wasn't even supposed to be a starter in Spicker was a way better jungler than Broxah. So my problem is, if you consider mid a 2v2 lane, like people often say, well, Jensen already's at a mad disadvantage in that scenario. Like, it wouldn't have been at the beginning of the playoffs because they were both meme junglers. But by the end, mate, that last match from Broxah I thought was appalling.
Okay, Nelson, what do you think of Brox's champion pool as if you plunged him in the LPL as a jungler who's playing mostly like league rays and are the carries? I mean, you're watching LCS. So what do you think if you plunged, say, Brox or Spica into LPL champ pool playstyle? How would they fare?
I mean, I think Speaker, if he stays in LPL and at this current level, he should be able to survive. And I think he can improve. But for Broxer, he has been playing for a while, and he's probably gonna be like the worst jungler, in LPL, because his pathing doesn't make sense. He doesn't think about what his team is gonna do or what the enemy jungler is gonna do, and he doesn't punish the enemy team hard enough.
Yeah, the two factors for me that kill me with the Broxer discussion is this. I'm not even someone, I will fully admit, I think jungle, and especially, actually, I would say jungle and support, since support start to roam, are the hardest to understand if you're not a pro player, because there's so many things that they're doing that don't show up. You have to understand the meta of what they're doing and why they, what the response they expect. So I will fully admit, junglers are harder for me to rate than a top laner, for example. But two areas that even as a layman, I look at Broxer and I just don't get why people rated this guy. And it's this. Number one, he literally looks like he just does whatever the laner says, even if it doesn't make sense. If you notice, one thing I love about junglers, it's something Dom always says, is a good jungler has to know when to say no. He has to know when to say, the top laner's come now, because, the top laner, listen, the top laner's part of it makes sense. He wants you to come to reset his wave. Always. He wants you to come for the kill. There's reasons why. He wants to come because he's in a losing matchup. But a good jungler knows when to say, I can't come now. It doesn't make sense. I won't get the gank off. And you know what? There's a gank going to come up in bot in a minute. So Broxer looks like he just goes, oh yeah, okay. And then when he fucks up, it's people think that's being a good teammate. That's being a bad teammate. That's irresponsible as a jungler.
I mean, it is a very OCD style role in the jungle where your top laner is saying, please come reset my lane. But let's say you're playing a carry jungler and now you have an opportunity to counter jungle 2 camps versus helping him out and messing your route. So you have to do in your head, how much do I need to help this guy? And how important is he for our composition? How important am I for the composition? Plus the pressure I'm applying in this part of the map. Which one of these is worth it? Can my team help me out here? What are the long-term consequences of not helping him with this wave? And then going through the actions. And you got to make that decision instantly. And you have to make the decision all the time because all your laners are asking for your help. So if you're not just in your mind galaxy braining 24/7, you're really not pulling things off. And that's why I think it's a lot easier to be an instinct style jungler, or eventually what was before where your laners just called you and you're like, all right, I know what I need to do. Otherwise I'm just going to overheat my brain just thinking of all these decisions.
I mean, I don't think that's the correct way to play, because I think all these things can be planned beforehand, especially if there is no level 1 invade. So the top laner should be able to tell you, on the 5th wave, the 6th wave, or 7th wave, you need to come up, help me fix the lane, and help me base. But seems like maybe they don't do this in LCS. I'm not sure.
Doesn't seem like it, mate.
I mean,
that's the famous thing. I don't know if you've ever seen these interviews. There will often be interviews, Nelson, where when a top EU mid laner goes to NA, because that's the most famous role to import, one of the things they're always shocked by is they just say, when you play solo queue against the other good mids, they don't even trade properly. They just sort of have had what we call a gentleman's agreement. It's almost like they just let you farm and you farm and they farm, and people don't even punish each other. So I would suspect a lot of them don't understand waves in the way you're describing, unfortunately.
Because I mean, maybe it could just be because we have what I see is Flandre every game he just tells the jungler oh, I need help on this wave, so the jungler has to adapt his path at level 1,
So you're telling me Flandre can tell you, listen, I need help on the 8th wave before the game begins?
Yeah. I mean,
in a certain matchup or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. In most matchups, you can do it.
Yeah.
Respect.
So that is the dream as a jungler, right? Yes. You're okay, 8th wave, when is the time of this?
Exactly.
Right, make my path. If your laners did that, I feel like you would have such an easy way to jungle. I would agree with you, Nelson, that ideally you would want all your laners to know, hey, I can ward this Raptor on my first wave push, and then we can start moving like this. But I don't think that the level 1 and pre-game planning is that intense over here.
Yeah, because I think you should be able to visualize how the matchup goes. If the enemy is as good as you, and how the matchup should go, it should be the same like almost every time.
Sure. And then the
'Cause, I
other
mean,
thing,
the champions are the same. Yeah, I mean the champions are the same. It's like there's no way like the champions have different abilities every game.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
matchup is like static.
And then the other thing about Broxer, and this is the thing to me that means he is not and has never been a world-class jungler, in my opinion. Because, again, this is where fans always get lost, right? They always make the mistake, because I talk like I'm a super fan, right? They forget I have access to all these players. Like, some of my best mates, you don't know it if you're a fan, are some of like the most legendary League of Legends players of all time. You think I never have a conversation with them privately and ask them? So I have known so many junglers in EU, and I'm talking about some that aren't even considered like the best in the region. They're just like good pro junglers who told me the problem with Brox is this, right? If he ever gets so that he has the winning lanes and he's even in like a jungle matchup where in theory he could like punish you, pressure you. They said it's fucking amazing playing against him. He just chills like in his jungle and you just feel like, oh, phew, I'm against Brox. Like, fuck, if that was like Yankos or something, I'd be getting fucked up now. It'd be really hard for me. But like against Broxy, you just feel like, I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
Yeah, I remember it was like Kjo who said it.
Yes, he said it recently on Crackdown, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, watch it.
I mean, if the same responsibility falls on the laners to track your waves, the jungler should also have the responsibility of, hey, on the second spawn of this camp, the third, the fourth of this camp around this time, let's go for an invade. Help me out here. So the jungler is just as responsible for this kind of pre-game planning as a laner should be. Is that the case for you? It is, Nelson?
Yeah, like for example, in LPL, like I'll give you like a classic matchup. So it's like maybe Nidalee against Graves, and most like all the players know that Nidalee like they farm faster than Graves. But how fast is like usually you could invade the second Rave camp because like Graves wouldn't be able to like full clear as fast as you, and that Rave camp there's like a 10-15 second window where you can counter jungle for free, and it's stuff like that where like minute details where I think it makes the region better.
Sure. So anyway, the reason I brought all that up is because I agree, Crumbz. If we're going in isolation, like they do in the NFL, like which quarterback was better, you just ignore his entire team. You just like as though his arm was the only thing doing it, right? If we do that, I'm with you. Like if I have to vote who was the better one in the playoffs, I mean, Bjergsen wins easily. He was the best player in the entire playoffs. I don't think it's even really that debatable. My problem is this. When they met head to head, tell you what, first of all, there were at one point in time, for most of that series, in fact, Jensen was the better player in that series. That was the one where Doublelift was already carried. That was tactical. Fucked that up compared to the fact the whole bot lane at TSM was better than the TL one in my opinion. So in my opinion, especially bearing in mind like they were in winning positions, I think if they'd have won that series, like that would have been the ultimate revenge for Jensen. Like he outperforms Bjergsen in the series, he beats Doublelift and Bjergsen. He was even I think he was getting cocky trying to pick Zillion. Like he was even trying to fucking like win on Bjergsen's pick or some shit. Like dude, I know, but I agree for the whole playoffs. I'll give it to Bjergsen, but I actually think in that matchup, like Jensen did great. I feel so bad from the way it went. Like the nature of how they lost.
I mean, I don't think they should have lost the first game, because they got like TSM through, they got the Baron, and TL just through again. So it didn't actually make sense to me. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about because I've been watching a lot of LPL Lee Sins, and it feels like the most important thing about an LPL Lee Sin is using kick flash to pick somebody off by themselves. Right? You see somebody Q, kick flash, bam, they're dead. I'm looking at game one because I'm trying to assess, all right, how well did this matchup play out? And that's really not what's happening here. Like, there's no kick flashing Lee Sin, right? That this is not the play that is happening in any of these games. It's like defensive flashes to get out. This is the way that the lead is played.
Because, I think the meta is quite simple now, quite straightforward, I think. And basically, you fight for the Drakes, right?
Yes.
And I think, most junglers, what I see is, they are always in vision of the enemy team during the Drake fight because they feel like, I have to smite the dragon because the dragon is so important, But I think only Speaker is the only one who look for flanks even as the jungler. And I think that is actually the correct way to play because most of the engage is on the jungler right now, unless you're like Graves or Nidalee.
I love hearing the way you view playing the game. It really is such a refreshing breath of air to hear that this is how other teams are playing the game.
Listen, Crumbz, I got a deep fucking Rolodex that I can go into, homie. I've got people you never even heard of. I can just pull out. I got people who just only speak Spanish that I just bring out, pop them out on a fucking LPL show. Who the fuck's this guy? Like, you don't need to worry. Shut the fuck up and listen to this guy. So, right. Here's the other thing as well that kills me is in the TL versus TSM series. Because I'm sorry, the way the whole playoffs went. The problem I have is the entire playoffs hinges on the Team Liquid versus TSM match, because whoever wins that probably wins the playoffs with how FlyQuest played in the finals. I think FlyQuest choked in the finals. Like, a lot of them played badly. So in my opinion, Team Liquid actually gave Team TSM the best challenge in my opinion. Like, they took them really to the limit. And I'm talking about when TSM had gotten good. We're not talking about when GGS is still trying to beat the bad TSM. And the killer thing for me is this, Crumbz. I forget who said it on Twitter. It was one of the people who's an analyst. Maybe it was Empire or someone. I thought they nailed it with their tweet. They said something like it felt like, maybe it was Mark Z, I forget. They said it felt like Team Liquid took all the criticism about being a boring, slow team that just only plays off like, scaling and late game. It's like they took that and then they tried to like prove that they're not like that. And then they played like this mad style where they were constantly having fights and they were terrible at objective control and they never met a dragon fight they didn't want, even if someone died or they got poked out. Like, dude, they played like the exact opposite of how if I was their coach, they were playing in the server the exact opposite of how I'm going to coach them. Because one thing that I think made Jack the coach of the split is that they had such a controlled style. Like, they looked like everyone on the team knew their job. Everyone knew how they were going to play. And in the past, they were good at objective control. They were terrible. How many times did you see them kill a Baron, stay for the fight, and lose all the Baron buffs?
That's how they lost.
What is this shit? Yeah. It's so stupid. And the amount of times, by the way, in general in LCS, this is the number one thing that's killing me. I'll give you credit, actually. It happens in LEC too, because G2 did this in Fnatic against the upper bracket final in that famous game. They lost game 3 or whatever it was, right? The number of times teams take a greedy fight where if you win, you don't end the game, but if you lose, you might have had their game ended. Like, you lose and they can just push in and take all your time, the inhibitor, like these are like, in poker, they have that concept of like plus EV, like plus expected value. When you go into a scenario, if you're minus expected value, you probably shouldn't go for it, because it means that like on the upside, you don't win much and you lose way too much. So it's not worth the gamble. Like, Team Liquid didn't understand this principle, mate.
I mean, I think that any teams don't understand like how the dragons work right now, because like, for example, if the first dragon is like an air drake, then yeah, that means the dragon soul is going to be really strong, but if it's like an ocean or fire, then it's not that important, because
so they overemphasize it.
Yeah, it could be a cloud soul, in the
right.
third or fourth drake. And then especially like TL against TSM, the final game, I felt like there was no point in contesting cloud soul at all, because I think the meta right now, at least from what I see in LPL, is like the better late game team comp is stronger than the Dragon Soul. Doesn't matter even if you have Ocean.
Yes, exactly, right. And so if you have a carry top lane matchup and the Dragon is different, and the Dragon is, say, the first one is your Ocean or Fire, you just ignore that, play to your carry top that's going to outscale, and now, yeah, you might have a Cloud Soul later, but you're still completely stomped in the side of the match.
Yeah, because the final fight is still going to be like, everyone's going to have their cooldowns and you're just going to fight once only, just to win the game, So I think it's kind of weird that NA likes to contest Cloud Drakes, because at least when I speak to other players from other teams, like the top 4 LPL teams, they told me that if it's Cloud Soul, they're just going to ignore the Soul, because the only way for an enemy team to come back is to get Elder.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
stall it. You stall the dragon, because you could get soul, you could be ahead, you lose the dragon fight, the elder fight, and you lost the game off that.
Yeah, and if the enemy wastes time to do dragon, then you can just get like free camps, free waves, free towers. It's not really worth it,
Yeah, there's another thing, by the way, that actually also applies to like both the Team Liquid and the FlyQuest series for TSM that I thought was also appalling, is the number of times that the team, like, because we all know in theory Team Liquid and FlyQuest are having all these scaling comps, the number of times you are in a perfectly fine map state, like you're not behind, or if you're behind, you're a tiny bit and you're scaling, so you don't need to fight, and they would do a skirmish somewhere in like, not the fog of war, but like an area of the map, just like in the jungle or something. They'll do the fight, right? And then if you lose the fight, same concept I was talking about before, they just get the dragon for free. It's like, why are you taking that fight? Like, what's the point in it? It happened so many times.
It's weird because it was veterans.
I mean, I don't think they understand like the concept of tempo as well, because I see so many times, maybe like 2 minutes before Dragon, or at least like 1.5 minutes before Dragon, one team like all in the side lane, and of course they get a kill, but they use their cooldowns, and they won't have their cooldowns for the Dragon fight. And do you actually think it's worth? Because if the lane state is good for the other team, then it doesn't matter if you die, if you die once.
Yes.
It's also an opportunity, though, because I see a lot of times, too, where you make a play in the side lanes a minute 30 in advance, and if you have already committed to playing the side lane instead of going for the dragon, and the other team hasn't realized that, they're going to spend all that time setting up, doing all the prep, and losing even more out of the other side of the map instead of just trying to salvage what was lost in that top side or bot, wherever the side lane was, and then setting up for the dragon. So I think there is a ton of value in just giving up the objective, but it's knowing that you have a plan to give up the objective instead of, oh, we were not prepped, let's just not contest it.
Yeah, I think most of the time it's just like, oh, we got caught, like, oh, our top laner got caught, and so we have to just trade. And it doesn't seem like they make plans in advance to like actively trade, because I know the better teams. Yeah, because I know, like, for example, if you want to take the dragon, you push. I think the right way is just push out the side waves. You recall at 1 minute before dragon. You go mid, contest the wave, and set up vision. And if you don't want to contest, then you do the same thing, but you go to mid like 30 seconds before, so that you don't let the enemy get the dragon like for free. You force them to contest the mid wave, and then you just like trade the opposite side. Then you assign the lanes.
So your play for contesting dragon is you shove out side lanes no matter what, but you get to mid to contest at a minute. If you don't want to contest, you get to mid 30 seconds beforehand.
Yeah, and then you get to mid 30 seconds beforehand, and then after that you reassign your lanes, like probably to top side, because for dragon. And I don't see like any teams do this at all.
Sure. Like another factor.
I don't think so. I remember even when I went to LCK and I started talking to coaches there, they were very much about thinking about timings and waves and how the game is structured around these sort of intervals of things happening. And I don't think it happens here for sure. Like the focus is not about looking at the game through such a analytical lens.
Put it this way, it's one of the things where people memed on Monty, because obviously he was one of the person who always used to say win conditions all the time, and he would always talk out of draft, here's the win condition, like this champion's got to get ahead, or they've got to play the comp this way, they've got to look for this. And people made it a meme because they did that thing they always do, where when you give people good advice, they say like, well, that's just obvious, and then proceed to never apply it to their life. It's like, that's what they did, because the way they used, and that's so sad, Crumbz, is again, I can't just flame LCS teams for this. If you've ever listened to those LEC, the ones where Fnatic release the little highlight vids with their comms. Dude, that team collectively doesn't know what a good fight is. Hylissang and Bwipo want every fight, the others want no fights. That means that you don't even have win conditions. You're thinking 1 millisecond before a possible team fight, is this a good fight or not? What? You should already know based on the state of the map, which lanes are ahead, which champions are fed, what items, whether we want to fight. That's why when people say there is no shot caller, I don't mean one guy only talks. I mean one guy who tracks that. I mean, like, I would have hoped someone like a Core JJ would do that. He'd be telling them, like, look, if possible, we don't want to fight now, actually. So, like, you can see if you can pick one off, but if not, back off. Like, these LCS games, like, people have overused the term Clown Fiesta, but it was constant fighting. There was almost never people backing out of the fights.
I have a new one. I don't know if obviously you didn't watch the show match, but I did a little show match. And I have the perfect term for where it goes beyond the fiesta. It is now a rich girl's quinceañera. That is where that? You don't know what a quinceañera is? So it's I think it's Mexican at the tradition, but when a girl turns 15, they throw a giant party, like the biggest party of the world. It's supposed to be her thing into womanhood. And I'm talking like huge party. Like you got DJs, mariachis, food, everybody is invited. Like it is the largest party you could have for a girl's life. So a quinceañera is way beyond a fiesta.
Right, I see. So it's because it's yeah, exactly. It's more than just a fiesta, right? I see. Oh, by the way, to tie into an earlier point as well, right? Listen, when people will never understand this, Crumbz. So this is for the very few smart people out there. Obviously, I like to have fun on Twitter, and I don't like TSM. So, for example, even if TSM was playing the worst team in the world, I'd be like, go the other team, I hope they win. Like, doesn't mean I think they actually will win. I won't even lie to you. Obviously, I really wanted TSM to lose that game 5 because it'd be fucking hilarious. But I won't even lie, Crumbz. Like, if you were if the LCS was WWE, it was fake wrestling, and you were making the best storyline, right? It sounds like you've got it, right? They're in game 5, they're versus the team that always wins late game as well. But what ruined the story, it ruined the whole match, was the last pick of the entire draft was Solo deciding to lock in fucking Gangplank. Mate, even though I was hoping on Twitter, somehow TSM ints into them and wins it, when I saw him lock in Gangplank, I knew in my fucking heart they'd lost this game, mate. It was so depressing. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier, the fact that the meta eventually became either self-sufficient or weak-side supportive ADCs so that you could play top lane matchups, Solo never got the memo. First of all, homie, you had the worst AD carry of all the AD carries left in the tournament. Like, you'd have to go to the first round of the playoffs to find a worse AD carry. So we don't want to play through our AD carry. Secondly, one of the things people praised Solo for, because obviously he has this history of like, is he a toxic guy or whatever, was that he kept picking, like, you know, he would pick a losing matchup and he would be at the weak side to let the rest of the map. No, that was the game, like you said before. That was the game to take your carry. That was the game for you to win the game Solo. You're even, in my opinion, like you weren't by the end of the tournament, but like in the regular season, I thought Solo was better than Broken Blade. I thought he played better. I thought he was a better player.
I mean, yeah, I think he's a better player than Broken Blade for sure, but I think there's just something wrong with the drafts because he could just pick Renekton, you know, and there shouldn't be an issue because like FlyQuest, their first 4 picks are just scale better than TSM's.
Yeah, true, right? Renekton's an option, but no one wants to take the skill matchups, right? No one takes it. They'd rather take the I'm going to get my ass beat matchup and then hopefully out team fight you instead of you play skill, I'll play skill. Let's throw down. And it doesn't feel like the team is willing to give a player that much agency in whether the game is won or lost.
I mean, it's not even a skill matchup. It's just Renekton just wins.
It's skill matchup here, man. I'm telling you, it's a skill matchup. We don't have.
Yeah, I think Solo is good enough, but they probably just like didn't practice, like giving him resources.
Sure. Yeah, remember what I said earlier, Nelson? That like Bjergsen's playing TF and Zillion blind into anything and having prio at lane. So laning's different in LCA, my friend. What about this, though? One area no one... Like, this is where you know, Crumbz, that people always come in with their narratives set and then they just argue around those narratives. I haven't seen almost anyone point out, like, because everyone was so obsessed in the Team Liquid matchup with, like, Jensen versus Bjergsen and all the rest of it. Like, first of all, not only, like I said, did they sort of miss that Doublelift, like, quietly sort of carried the series, but even worse, nobody flamed Core JJ. The man is the MVP of the whole league. He was terrible. He was not doing any of the shit he was. The whole reason everyone gave him the MVP is because he would always make like god tier plays. Or he'd do like some sort of a flank, or he'd like dive in just when you thought the fight was lost. Like, I felt like he was invisible in these series. This guy was supposed to be the best support in the whole region.
So this is something that happens every single time, and I'm really curious to get your take on what this is, Nelson. But every single time for my career, whether it's playing, casting, desk, when playoff rolls around, you want your best players on playmaking champions. You want them on things that can carry, and there's champions that can carry in every single role. When I see Core JJ, first game, last pick Braum, I know it's already doomed. Right? It's already doomed. This is your guy that's been hard smurfing on Blitz, Bard, Thresh all year long, and you're giving him a champion that has no playmaking potential. What's going on, right? You're not enabling your players.
I mean, I think that Braum it's fine because there isn't a better pick at least for the first game, you know.
It's a good pick, but it's Core JJ.
Yeah, he means it doesn't let him be Core JJ, you know.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any other pick which fits.
No, Nelson, listen, mate, the mistake you're making here is you're applying, like, listen, we're loving your insights, so keep giving us it, but you're making the mistake of applying the LPL draft to the LCS. Like, put it this way, I'll say this right now. When Crumbz was saying that, he also reminded me of two similar conclusions I came to at the end of LCS, which is why I don't believe global meta thinking applies to LCS, because the players and the teams aren't good enough. Here's two rules, which sound like noob shit, but it's real. So one, from seeing Bjergsen just pick Zilean over and over again and win, right? Here's how you ban in LCS. You don't ban their power picks and the things that'll ruin their comp. You just ban whatever you can't play against. So if you don't know how to play against Zilean, just ban it. Just ban it. Even though it's not a champion you should ever waste a ban on, waste a ban because your team can't play against it. And here's the other rule, mate, and this is the killer. As he just said there, you can pick whatever you want. If that's like, if you have a support who's a playmaker, just pick him whatever you want. So how about the last game of the finals? Rakan pick for Biofrost? Is that the best pick? Is that the best one? No, but you know what? He's a good Rakan. The others don't know what the fuck they're doing against it. They don't play against good Rakan. So as a result, he's just styling on them all the time. I agree. The drafts don't make sense. Like, that actually looks like a bad draft in some ways. But because it becomes like individual players, like, because it's like a fucking ARAM, actually it's better to just give him the champion. I don't even disagree with it now. I can see the wisdom in it if it makes sense.
I mean, but it doesn't help you win internationally, you know?
Yes, that's the problem.
I mean, I would like to see you pick that against like Jackie Love and see how your lane goes.
Yes.
Because I mean the team comps are fine, you know. Like if every champion is like level 16, I think the team comps are fine, but the matchups don't actually make sense. Because how could you blind Rakan? Never happens.
Right. I think I don't remember, it was either the TLTSM, but somebody actually picked Rakan into Leona.
TSM. I
bet they won that game, right?
I think you said it was the last game. Yeah.
Yeah,
They did it again. He can't keep getting away with this. That's all I'm saying, Biofrost. He can't keep getting away with it. Luckily, he's not going to. He's going to go to Worlds. And by the way, listen, this is the secret, Crumbz, to being not just an analyst, but one that doesn't have to be, you know, buttoned up and on the broadcast and be a good guy. I can just be a hater and an analyst. So I just shift the goalposts. So, okay, obviously I wanted TSM to not make it to Worlds. They made it to Worlds. Ah, shit. Whatever. You know, at least they won't win LCS. Ah, fuck, they won LCS. A light bulb goes off above my head. But you know what? We all know the number one seed from NA is a Poison Chalice. I start rubbing my hands. A dream imagines in my brain. Jingdon Gaming, DRX, Rogue, the Dream Group. We pray to the gods. Let that pool system smite NA once more, League gods, with your cruel might.
There's less teams. It might happen.
I mean, I think TSM is, at least compared to other seasons, I think they're like by far the best team in NA because they have the right idea on how they should play, you know, even though they might not be able to execute it. Like, I think right now it's like you either play like jungle carry and towards top side, or just like go full lane kingdom and play towards bot side, you know.
Is TSM the only team that you felt like was doing something right or was impressive, or do you think that the other teams, FlyQuest, Team Liquid, have a chance doubling down on how they play the game? Or is that something that you like in particular? Because out of the three teams, like, do you feel like, oh, this is good, I would like to take some of this into my own gameplay?
Oh, you mean from NA?
Yeah. It's a stretch, man. It's a stretch here.
No, not exactly. But I think, like, at least like from the 4 LPL teams you see, like top esports, LGD, JDGS, and Suning, it's like all of them, they can play like both styles, you know. Like either my jungle is the hard carry of the game, or like I play towards my laners. But it seems like teams in NA and EU can only play like one style, which is I just go for lane kingdom.
You have insane junglers in the LPL. Is I think a big difference. Like your junglers straight up play all the carry champions and really well.
I mean, like even you could be mechanically bad, but it's just that if you want to play towards jungle, you just need a lot of discipline, and it feels like teams in NA don't actually have like discipline. Like sometimes I even wonder if they speak English, you know.
Whoa.
By the way,
like there's no way, like in some lane states or some situations where you get ganked or die, but they just like surprise me.
If I had to pick one matchup I would also like to see at Worlds, I want to see Broxer have a game against Peanut. And I'm just going to sit back, I'm going to fucking put my feet up, I'm going to have a big popcorn, I'm going to have a fucking whiskey sour next to me, I'm just going to fucking enjoy it and just go, you know what, my dude, You just do you. You know,
You're really
Broxy,
optimistic,
I
Thorin.
know.
They have to go through play-ins, all right? They got to actually go through play-in teams.
Peanut is in planes as well.
Yeah. So,
By the way, that's the dream right there. That's the best of 5 to make it into Worlds. Oh, best of 5 of Peanut literally just saying to Broxer, like, welcome to the international stage again, my friend. And you know what? You don't have caps in your lane anymore, so tough shit. You've just got fucking 2 solo laners who hate you and secretly wish their general manager would buy them a good jungler next year. Keyword secretly there, because they're professionals, so they're not going to say that publicly. But listen, I can read a man's face. I know when people like Impact and Jensen, who by the way do deserve better, are just like, really. It's like that meme everyone made where Bjergsen in that GGS series like just turned to his like is right, like just looking like, really, bro, like, come on, I'm 1v9 in these fucking games. Like, can you just give me a break?
I mean, Broxer, I think it feels like he just doesn't have a voice on TL because he's just like the bodyguard of all the laners, you know. Even when they pick him Graves, like, why do you pick Graves if you're not going to farm? So
exactly,
I don't really... Like, Graves is such a useless champion if you're, like, even with the enemy jungler.
It's like, I mean, I remember Crumbz said this on an episode. One of the weirdest things about Broxer is his champion pool makes no sense for who he is and his, like, confidence level as a jungler. Dude, he tries to pick Lee Sin and Graves all the time. Meanwhile, he actually, during the season, he's not even a guy who liked or was good on Trundle. You would think Trundle's his whole fucking gameplay. Like, if you looked at him as a player, you think, mate, that champion was made for you. Like, you should be playing that all the time.
I'd really like to see him on Gragas. I think Gragas can be a really good compromise for him right now, or at least in Worlds.
What about more specifically FlyQuest? Because we sort of talked around them, but like there was a few issues I had here. Like, first of all, again, trying to be as fair as possible to all the mid laners. If I consider mid lane and then I also add in the context of who your jungler is, right? PoE definitely was underwhelming in the finals, but also, what the fuck was his jungler doing half the time? Like, he never was in position to do what he wanted to do.
So, okay, game 1, I think Victor pick is kind of an int, right?
That's him thinking that's a skill matchup, by the way. That's one of those classic PoE ones where he thinks he just knows the other side of the matchup better or whatever, you know.
I thought it differently. I thought when he took Victor, he thought, okay, we're gonna go all late. We're buckling down on the late game.
Right.
Thorin, Victor, Kate. Let's just have as much late game damage as possible. But forgot that Zilean is not that kind of champion.
I mean, does he actually play like Zoe? Because
no. So that's one. So that has been one criticism that I've thrown at FlyQuest that you brought up when you said that in NA, like you get really punished by in LPL, you get really punished by certain champions. So Zoe, Twisted Fate, and Galio were the 3 picks that FlyQuest did not touch all year long. They just didn't play any of those 3.
I mean, because like if the enemy picks, like, I just feel like Zoe probably is the best comp right there, or at least you change your jungler, you know. So
the problem is, PoE is that mid laner who, if Azir is available, it's going to be Azir every time. If not, it's going to be Orianna. Like he's like Frogger, mate. He's got his wheelhouse. He just stays in it. He just doesn't leave his comfort.
He just has a much bigger wheelhouse than Froggen that is more relevant.
I mean, he can pick Orianna there as well, you know. But
I think Orianna was banned in that game. I'm pretty sure.
It wasn't. It was like LeBlanc.
It was not?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Fair enough.
But I mean, like the comp doesn't, like it just doesn't go well, at least in the early game.
So you're saying PoE got schooled on by Bjergsen. Well, Bjergsen did beat everybody alongside Spica.
I mean, if you're playing like Victor and Grace, I think anyone can play as Zilean, you know.
Right. Like
you're never gonna catch him.
I don't know. I didn't feel like PoE was really that bad in this series. It just felt like that as a team, they really had no idea how to deal with the global aspect of TSM's comps, which was the meta all year long. Yet for some reason, they never had an answer to it. I feel like they felt like it wasn't going to come around at the very last match because it kind of drifted away. It was Cloud9 that was spearheading, Twisted Fate, Galio, Golden Guardians had a little bit of that, but then TSM wasn't playing that way. They only really had the Twisted Fate and a few Cillian here and there. So maybe they thought, hey, this might not come back since we're not doing it. Team Liquid's not playing this way, really. So when TSM does it, like, oh shit, they actually remembered this is a way to play the game. We haven't actually played well against it. The only time we played the Orianna TF matchup was against Froggen before he got pinched into Academy with a Cadian. Like, that was a free game. Like, that's not a sample of how to beat a Twisted Fate in the first place.
Because I think there are a few picks which could beat like TF, but it's like Azir. But it also requires you to have like Jace top lane, you know, because Azir is just afraid of poke. But since they don't play top side, so Azir is like always the perfect pick against FlyQuest because it's always a tank top. So,
by the way, I've got a question for you here, Nelson, and I'll warn you up front. It's a loaded question. Like, I sort of know you're probably going to flame NA when I say this, but here we go. I'll set it up as though it wasn't, right? What do you think if I tell you that in the LCS, once they got deep into the playoffs, most teams, based on their pick and ban, implied not only could they not play Caitlyn, but they also couldn't play Ashe against Caitlyn?
I mean, Ashe is...
In the LPL, you take over the game with these picks, right?
I mean, Caitlyn is like first pick. And I feel like most teams don't actually understand the matchups with Caitlyn yet, because I've only seen like FBI and Huhi, they played the matchup well. Like, they use Caitlyn and Tahm Kench, you know. Because that's like the strongest matchup at bot lane in that patch. But only Golden Guardians used it.
Caitlyn Tahm Kench stronger than Kate Lux or Kate Karma?
I mean, you're not going to play against a Kate Lux. As in, there won't be mirror matchups, but
right.
you can beat every Ashe matchup because it's like Caitlyn, Tahm Kench, they have more damage at level 1, so like you can just all in the enemy team at level 1 if they want to contest the wave. So you always have push, you know. Doesn't matter if the enemy picks like Karma or Ashe.
Because listen, everyone knows I'm never going to go full S and be like, the red side ban was fucking at R4. Was like, I'm not on that level, but I will say this. The amount of blue side Caitlyn bans in these series also just drained my hope for Worlds, Crumbz, because this shit isn't going to fly there, mate. You can't be doing these bans there.
It's the bans that you were talking about. It's about what you don't really get to play against, right? People are like, we're not really good against this. We're going to ban it instead of it making sense as a blue side. This is the way that we should actually be playing right now, ban.
I think, I mean, with Caitlyn, you just have to be patient, you know. And I don't think like teams are patient enough.
Right. I think a very patient player that has been impressive for me is someone like Someday. I feel like he actually has a ton of patience where I'm getting leads slowly and I know that at some point I'm going to hit a spike that is going to allow me to explode the game. I see that out of him more than any other player. That's very careful and calculated in how they're growing their lead and not dying and taking those low or negative EV kind of plays that Thorin was talking about. Is that the kind of patience you're saying that needs to be shown by other players?
Yeah, I think like basically it's a combination of like, you know, tracking the jungle timers, tracking like the teleports and the base timers of the enemy mid lane. Because like there are so many plays like in League of Legends right now where maybe like a 3-man dive bot lane or 4-man dive bot lane, there are always answers, you know. Like it's like a set play itself just to answer those like 4-man bot lane dives. But it seems like other than TSM, most of the other NA teams don't have an idea on how to actually like solve those situations. Like for example, like for example, if like your mid is getting pushed in, like both mid laners have TP and your mid is getting pushed in, then definitely you save your TP just to protect your bot lane from that dive. Like you take the skill check with a tower advantage. But I think like most teams they're either like too selfish for their own lane or they don't dare to take the skill check.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You're getting shoved in and you're thinking, I'm already losing lane. I'm going to save myself with the TP. And then the other guy just roams bottom or TP's bottom and shits on your bot lane. And then it's like, oh, your bot lane is so weak. But it's like, it was actually my fault in mid lane for losing the lane and having to use my TP to get back to it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just a matchup, you know, but you have to know like what's the answer or what's the reaction to it for like the enemy's plays.
By the way, talking about Bjergsen basically like being the MVP of the playoffs as far as I'm concerned, like 1v9 in a bunch of games, I have to say one thing that's also underwhelming is I've just looked it up now. If you look at the 3 series that he won against Cloud9, Team Liquid and FlyQuest to win the championship, except for games on Syndra, literally his signature champion, every win Crumbz is on TF or Zillion. It's literally all abusing globals that the other team doesn't know how to play against. The fact that he doesn't get punished in lane, and then the fact that in team fights, people just don't know what to do against those champions if it's Bjergsen. Like, Bjergsen plays those champions so well in the team fights.
Yeah, I think TF, it's possible to blind pick, but it's not that easy. Like if you're in other regions, because the enemy would just pick like Azir and maybe like Set or Volibear, and like number 1, you're going to get pushed in from level 1 to 18, and number 2, like there's a jungler with crowd control who can actually like kill you. So like the TF is not going to be able to move, But seems like teams don't play that matchup that much.
Not really. No. I mean, we have such a smaller champion pool. I feel like that there is a big value in having so many teams in LPL that you get to run through almost like a simulation of all these different champions and see what works and what doesn't. So we have to just speculate and see from that's going on. But we don't have the players that play or the teams that have those combinations ready to go and they're willing to play, because it'll always be like, okay, if they're going to go Twisted Fate, well, let's get the priority on Graves because our Graves jungler is really good. And now they're like, oh, well, shit, now we actually have Graves into TF. We're so doomed. It's already over.
I mean, I think it feels like they don't think about the draft as carefully as like the other regions, because like it's not just like lane versus lane. You have to look at like jungler, support, other lanes as well.
Like, also, by the way, go on.
Yeah, I mean, you could even pick like Galio against TF and just play defensive and follow TF everywhere, and he can't do anything, and you're better in team fights. But I rarely see teams like play Galio against TF or even play Galio at all.
Certainly. Another thing as well that I actually thought was rough was, listen, I know for the narrative, it sucks that Cloud9 didn't go because they were so dominant for more like 1.5 splits, basically. They looked amazing. They looked like the only team that was going to do work internationally. But here's the problem. If you're talking about that Cloud9, yeah, it's a tragedy they didn't go. The Cloud9 that played against TSM, I'm glad they're not going to Worlds, mate. I wouldn't want to see that. That'd be fucking terrible. They were really bad.
I mean, it's like, I think it was the last game where it was like Lucian against Set. And after Cloud9 got first blood, they immediately started Baron and got wiped off the map, and didn't make sense, because if you scrim enough, you should know that in the early game you get a kill and it won't matter because the enemy has TP, and he'll be in a better condition for the Herald fight. But I'm not sure why Blabber started the Rift.
I mean, I was glad to at the end, of course, right? You're the best teams do get to advance, but it is sad. Right, it's your most dominant. It's so obvious. It's so long. You want to see them do well, but you don't want a team that was not able to adapt to such a slight shift in the meta going into Worlds. Like the Worlds meta, if it's so difficult to get a grasp on the meta like that, I feel like that would have only shown further when Worlds rolls around and you start getting stomped in scrims and you start to second guess yourself, which is really where most of the doubt comes from a ton of these players, where you know you're good, you're doing all this stuff, you can win some stage games, but if you have a day in scrims or a week of scrims where you've just ran it down, but you somehow do well in a stage game, it's really hard for you to understand where you're at.
The player, listen, plenty of players played bad in those series, but I don't know where in this fucking series Ven went. I don't know where the player went. I don't know where the champion pool went. Mate, he's still picking Ezreal half the time.
I mean, I don't think Ezreal was a problem. I think it was the last game. It was a great pick. It was the perfect AD pick, but it's just that C9 aren't patient enough. If they just give up the first few objectives, Sven can 1v9 later on.
Right, I see what you mean.
I mean, game one, I'm looking at.
Oh yeah, it was game one.
Game one draft, and okay, you lock in the Ezreal right away, but then when I see Kindred into 3 ranged champions and a Rakan, I don't like this already. This is already gonna be Kindred against Senna. Kill me now. Why am I even playing this champion here? And that makes it so much harder for Blabber to play that game. Like, I don't like Kindred into 3 range like that. Like, how do you feel about that, Nelson? There is some Kindred in LPL, but like here against TF Senna Graves and then a Lucian top, what am I supposed to do?
I mean, I think Kindred is okay if the enemy like doesn't play as well. Like if the Graves like if the Graves like goes for ganks, you know. But I think whether he pick Kindred or not, it doesn't actually matter, because if you pick like a tank jungler, they wouldn't have enough damage for like the later team fights.
Could you go lead? You've got Galio, you've got a like Lee Galio's fine.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Or you could even pick like Lilia, you know.
Right.
What do you think, Nelson, about that? Because there's one area I also am seeing a big difference between West and East, is if I'm watching the 2 big Asian leagues, Lilia jungles are fucking smurfing on people. They are dominating these games. When I've seen the Westerners play, it's so underwhelming.
Shadow was good though.
Oh, he had a good one in the playoffs. Yeah, you're right.
Because like Lilia has she clears the jungle very fast, and she has several like unique paths where she can go raves to enemy double golems and get a gang at top side, you know. And I don't think any teams like in the West are ready for that, because there are like so many creative paths and creative level ones for Lilia.
And then we never even saw it in the fucking finals. Like the championship didn't exist, Crumbz. Like they just don't pick it anymore, apparently.
Surprising. I mean, I actually really enjoy that Lilia has come out because of that, because there's other junglers that can get just as creative. You can go like red Raptors into mid, into the enemy Raptors, and then now you're level 3, you've soaked a little bit of mid XP, hit 3 that way, you can go on the way to top side if you're blue. So Lilia has shown that the jungle role can get super creative. But the LPL has already been doing this for so long. I mean,
yes.
there was a time where I think it was SOFM had a Gragas route where he would do Wolves Raptor doubles into recall level 3 boots, the Predator boots, and then he'd grab both buffs and then gank much later with the double buff power. And like no one's ever done that. No one's ever tried that here forever.
Maybe they just don't understand why he does that, because like by farming that way, the smaller camps will respawn first, and he can reach 6
exactly
before the enemy. You know? And I think like what's like very in the meta right now is like if you have the better jungler, like the one which farms faster, you always look for the fastest route to 6, and you force a fight when you're just about to hit 6. Like you force it all in maybe at like Scuttle or at the Rave camp. Like if you smite the Rave camp, you get level 6 and you win the fight immediately. You know. But if you fail the smite, then you just back off, or at least the even fight. But I don't think like it's that in depth in NA.
What did you think, Nelson, in the final? Like as I alluded to before, a player that I found underwhelming was Santorin, because I also thought he was another player where, I mean, I wouldn't have minded if people had said he was the best jungler in the All Pro rankings. Like, I thought he did pretty well in the regular season, but in the finals, something seemed off. What do you think?
I think it's just like they just didn't understand like the ban pick, and his laners are like just not good enough to help him, especially like the side lanes. Because like Graves in this set, it's like you can only get advantage if set decides to gank a lot and not farm, you know. But otherwise, like the speed of clearing camps is like almost the same. I feel like he should just pick like Volibear and go for like, a stronger early game, or maybe even like Olaf.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't play those champions, right? They just have not played them.
Like especially like the newer jungles like Set, Volibear, is like they clear so fast that unless the enemy makes a mistake, then Graves, otherwise Graves is like just gonna go even, you know. Or at least you need to learn how to trade dragons for 3 camps at top side.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have this game 1 open, and it is true, right? Set jungle clear is just as fast as Graves. So you just Cinderhulk on your camp, and it's pretty much dead. So it was sad to see that Santorin struggled, because I do feel like a lot of it was what Nelson is saying, where it was just draft problems, where it felt like FlyQuest was so gung-ho on a specific way of playing the game that they did not get to play other champions. Like you could just drop Nidalee bans and take Nidalee yourself, right? You could drop a ton of bans if you just play these champions and pinch them away, but the teams don't do that. They don't have
by the way,
the ability to play that.
that is what's going to hurt them internationally as well. If you have to ban Nidalee against all these top Asian teams, you're in fucking trouble. Like, you're just wasting a ban.
You got to pick it.
Yeah, you just got to pick it, or at least...
They're not going to do that, though. No one plays it, Nelson. The only one is Spicker, believe it or not. He's the only one who seems to be able to get it to work.
Yeah, because I think TSM is the only team which actually listens to what their jungle wants to do.
What a world. What is...
Yeah.
Did you just hear that, Thorin?
2020 is really fucked up, isn't it? You know, like, everything's just gone to shit, hasn't it? What's going on? So...
Yeah, because I find it, like, so weird that Spicker could play Shen, go red buff into bot gank, and didn't get punished for it.
Yeah, dude, let's just say that. Listen, fair play to how Spicker played it. Like, to even have the balls to do these picks and to play around, like, yes, props. But that's also the other thing that was depressing, is there was no attempt whatsoever when they saw him pick the Shen to, like, rake it really hard for him. No attempt at all. They just let him.
No level ones, right? They actually looked like they had so much more preparation going against Cloud9 than it looked like against TSM. The intense level ones, invades with the ranged champions. Like, you have Graves, Lux, Caitlyn. Like, you could do something level 1 with these kinds of champions. Like, there's a lot of opportunity that FlyQuest could have done in the early game to show that you were trying to step back the jungler, but they just didn't try it. It was all against C9.
I think what's lacking in NA, which is the late invade, because I feel like they don't late invade, because there's, like, if you have the stronger level 1, there's no downside to late invade, even if the enemy top is there. Like, yeah, you maybe they get 1 kill, but their top lane is over. So I'm not sure why teams, like, don't late invade at all.
Here's the problem, Crumbz. I've just looked it up now. Well, obviously the C9 series was in the upper bracket, right? So you have more days between. The problem with the TSM one is TSM had to beat Team Liquid the day before. So you're prepping for 2 teams in theory. So that's actually a rare scenario where the lower bracket probably favoured TSM in that regard, because FlyQuest couldn't prep for them in the same way.
I think you should still prep level 1s. I think you can prep level 1s regardless of who you're facing. It's just on the champions and matchups you have.
Okay.
But I think, like, TSM had decent level 1s, so it might not be as easy to invade, especially for, like, first 2 games. I think their level 1s are, like, equal.
Let me see here.
Yeah, I mean, TSM has Set and Ashe and Karma.
I'm just trying to see if Lilia, if Lilia ever got let through. No, I think TSM held on to that ban all 5 games.
And also, I mean, this sounds like a very simple way to describe it, but in all these games that TSM won, it would always be like close game. Sometimes the other team either is going to scale well or the other team has a slight lead. And TSM was just like a million times more clutch in all the fights. Like, the other team would fall apart and TSM would just get the right kills. They would just like play like they had confidence, like collapse on people. It's not like they were godlike, but they looked much better in contrast to all the teams they were playing.
I mean, I think that it wasn't close, because the lead which TSM got, like, almost every game was, like, so huge. It's just that Broken Blade kept throwing over and over again.
That's for game 5 of the final.
No.
Yeah, I'm talking about some of the other ones. Which one do you mean?
Like, the games he played Jace, especially the 3rd game.
Right? Yeah.
Like, I mean, how do you have, like, 180 CS at, like, 25 minutes? That's not how you play Jace. Like, that's the first thing. Like, I mean, if it was, like, I could give you, like, 10 top laners, from LPL vet. He's gonna have 270 CS on maybe, like, the mid game fight. One shock blast is just gonna, like, destroy your carries. But
there's another champion that just separates the two sides of the world, mate. Is if I pick you the best Korean top laner, the best Chinese top laner, they are going to smash people's heads in with Jace. If I give Jace to someone from NA, the people whose team it is start crying before the fucking game begins, mate, because they know what's going to happen.
No, I think it doesn't matter. Like, you don't even have to win lane as Chase. You just have to keep your farm up, and you're just gonna win mid game. But it just seems like they don't farm at all. They just group mid and fight for every Drake.
They might be thinking about the old way of playing Jace, which was trying to get as much of a lane advantage and just win lane instead of focusing on the farming aspect, and realizing that all you really have to do as Jace is hit one freaking shock blast when you group. Just
and the team fight is over.
Blast, that's it.
Yeah. And I think just like laning, they just have to focus on farming and pushing towers, when enemy goes for Drake. Like, that's how almost every Jace plays.
You should be coaching some of our teams, man. I think they could really use some of these insights.
He doesn't need to, mate. He's already coached in the LPL. Why would he take a downgrade of his job?
come to the land of the free. Isn't that the land of the Rona here in Los Angeles? That's what they changed the name.
Anyways, I think especially if Worlds starts tomorrow, it's gonna be hard for any. But I think TSM can adapt because I think they have the right ideas on how to play this current patch, especially if it doesn't change much for Worlds.
He's hopeful, Thorin.
I know. It's actually surprising.
But I mean, they're probably not good enough mechanically, because especially the third game against FlyQuest, they lost the game because they just played badly mechanically in the last team fight. Speaker engaged and he missed his E and the fight is over.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, good enough to win the whole thing is a conversation we'll need more years of evidence to really take seriously.
You've got to look like Cloud9 in spring before we can do that, before we can even put you in that conversation, just to be fair,
Yeah, actually, I think Cloud9 in spring was pretty good because I think they were the one which kind of figured out how to play this dragon meta. I think they were the first ones.
They were power farming dragons, right? They were not stacking them out. They would go 5 minutes in, dragon, force soul, fight 22 minutes in after you've lost all your lanes, and then you're just screwed.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they had better laners as well. But the thing in summer is Licorice played really bad, and they just took fights where they could just kill.
By the way, I'd be interested to know this. When Cloud9 was good and they were really dominant, were people in LPL and in China, were they actually looking at them? Did they think they were good? Was there any sense in that regard?
I think it's more the champion picks, especially I think they were the first one to pick Senna and Tamkench. Yeah, they were the first. It was fasting Senna. Really?
The
fasting Senna. Yeah, they were the first.
Fasting.
Could be.
Yeah, it might have been. FlyQuest was the first to do AD Senna after fasting.
Oh yeah, they were the first one to play fasting Senna, so the LPL teams picked up on it as well.
Look at that. NA's influencing the LPL.
There we go. Just unfortunately, you want to hear that of the team that's going to Worlds now. They just changed the meta. You don't want to hear it they won it in spring, they just fell apart completely. Yeah, they were actually quite innovative. They leading the timing's just off there, Crumbz.
Take what we can get.
Exactly. Oh, one last thing I want to ask is this, right? One of the problems I have with this whole year, for obvious reasons, is that all the playoffs have been played over the internet. They're not in the studio. It's not and also I mean, there's just reasons why there's problems in that regard, right? When the playoffs are this bad, there weren't many good playoff series this whole year, mate. There was barely any. Listen, there was a lot that were exciting. I always make that distinction. There weren't many that were good. There weren't any that were wow, all those banger games. I'd go rewatch that. Do you think any of these factors played into it? The online component, the fact you're not in a studio, the fact that in theory, there's less pressure. Any of this matter, do you think?
I think there are two factors. One is it's online, and second is you're playing against another local team, so you're pretty you guys know what the enemies want to do. So yeah,
familiar.
You're familiar. You're just more familiar, so you play differently. I think it's the same as LPL. You don't see the champion team. You don't see the best LPL teams play that way at Worlds when the matches actually matter.
Sure.
It's they're playing their own meta, right? They're playing their own scrim meta.
The game within the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the same happens in Counter-Strike as well, by the way. For example, there'll be times when fans will flame a match in Counter-Strike and be like, oh, it was such a bad game. And it's yeah, but you don't know, what you don't know as a fan is those two teams are scrim partners. And so the whole point is they're not playing the way that everyone else would because they've played 50 games against each other. So they're all thinking of how those games went and doing weird moves off that, trying to guess what this guy's going to do or trick him this way. And so it's not that, it's not like the first time they played was the first time they were on stage. A fan often gets lost in that, I've noticed.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for fans to actually understand what actually happens in a team or what happens during draft, because maybe for example, that Leona is good against Rakan, but your support just doesn't play it, stuff like that is like fans don't exactly understand, or they won't know behind the scenes.
I mean, once you become somewhat of a knowledgeable base in any field, and then you start experiencing what fans talk from the outside is, you're like, you have clearly no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like, you just, there's no way for you to possibly know what is going on. Like, you're not in it. You have to be in it to actually know the details of what's happening, whether that is in League or any other specialized occupation, if you want to call this an occupation, any specialized thing. The person doing it clearly knows it. If you no outside perspective will let you know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Nelson, and just while we have you here right now, what do you think about the LEC teams? Like, do you actually think, for example, like, listen, G2 is obviously pretty good, but like the other ones, they've all had moments where they've shown weakness. Like, Fnatic obviously looked fucking bad in the times in the final and the draft. They didn't look like could know. Obviously, Rogue had that terrible series against Fnatic. Mad Lions had their own dodgy scenarios. I mean, they only basically beat Schalke. Like, what about the teams that aren't G2? Like, have those teams got a chance against the best teams in the world, do you think?
I think like as long as teams are mechanically sound, they will have the chance to compete, because you get to bootcamp against the best teams, so you will definitely like improve. But if like your mechanical skill or your mechanical ceiling isn't there, then it would be really hard to compete in the current meta.
Did anyone in LPL like think Mad Lions was good when they were top of the league in Europe?
I know a few teams they watched like the like unique picks which Mad Lions have, like the Senna Wukong. I know some teams tried it in scrims.
How do you go?
They are still looking. Yeah, they are still looking at like LEC.
You're putting a big emphasis on mechanics from not just this conversation, but an earlier one, rightfully so. And I wonder, as a coach, how do you get a player that's maybe not as mechanically proficient on a champion up to speed? Like, are you telling them to do specific drills, 1v1s, VOD review, playing the game? Like, how do you get somebody that's maybe not as sharp as they should be to a level where you could confidently plunge them into a Worlds?
I mean, I think there's a difference between like knowledge of the lane matchup and mechanical skill itself. So like knowledge of the lane matchup, you have to like watch VODs or you practice in solo queue, But for mechanics, I think it just can't be taught. It's just like the amount of talent you have. It's stuff like reaction. Yeah, especially I think it's like more precisely. It's just what I look for is like reaction time. Like how do you get Bard outed when you have flash?
Yeah, like, well, that should be flashed that's a worrying trend, right there.
Yeah, but that's what. But Bjergsen got hit by a bar out when he had flash,
Yep.
And it's like, even if you have like all the lane like you have all the knowledge in the world, maybe you're playing Graves or Nidalee, you're 100 CS up because farming creeps doesn't take mechanics, But you can't land a spear, So how are you gonna win the team fight if you're in LPL?
Sure.
So that's it. That's over, Thorin. We don't have its natural talent.
I mean, because like, I think like at least for the game right now, it's just like laning and skill check on team fights. And if you can't do those, then you're not gonna win.
Here's the real problem with LCS, Crumbz, and this is going to be brutal, but I'm going to have to tell everyone it, is, right, you have two types of jungler that you can't only have one of these aspects. So you have like the Smithy type, like smart, knows what he's doing, just plays the champions that are going to work for him, knows what to do with them in the team. But because in theory people say he's not very motivated, doesn't look like he keeps his mechanics top notch, doesn't try to play like a super ganking jungler or anything. Then you have like Dardoch like coming in with mechanics and balls and stuff. The real problem is this: you need fucking Smithy to coach Dardoch. That's the only chance. Like, Smithy's not going to win Worlds, and Dardoch's definitely not. Well, he doesn't know his game, and he's still basically... The problem with him is, because he's been such a bad teammate, he's never had the chance to be in a team long enough to properly, like, get synergized with those players. He's in a new fucking team every year. So, like, you need those mechanical guys to, like, learn from the experience of the guys who actually know the game, in my opinion.
I actually think you can get rid of both and go a completely different way, because I'm a big fan of all these 17-year-old players that have just started to play the game because they have the mechanics and they have not thought about playing the game the old way. Like, they are super aggressive. They are very focused on what they need to do because they're living on the current meta. They have no previous information that is redundant to play the game from. So I think at this point, the more that you get new players to join in, the better they're going to get. So I actually prefer somebody to be brand new as a jungler and be like, oh shit, they've got they're aggressive and got mechanics. I'm in. Right, I know for a fact they're not thinking about another way of playing the game that's no longer relevant.
I mean, at least for the Dardoch point, I'm not sure like how good he is mechanically, but from what I remember, it's just that he has no idea what to do during team fights.
Yes. He basically just is a gank machine, mate. That's all he can do. He can gank if he's on those champions that let you do it. He can be really good in NA doing that, but I agree. Like, he's never been that great an overall player.
Yeah. I mean, most of the Western junglers like are kind of used to this way where they just go heavy ganking or a lot of lane pressure. I think only like Fnatic does like the jungle carry style.
Mate, Selfmade's a stud. He's like an LPL jungler. He's a beast.
Yeah, but his laners aren't because they don't actually care about what he's doing, so they just die, you know.
Yeah, look at his fucking solo laners. His solo laners, I don't think they're up to snuff, put it that way.
No, I mean, I think they're good, but they're just not coordinated.
Okay. Oh, obviously, yeah. That's the ridiculous thing that Fnatic fans don't get. If you're a Fnatic fan and you think I've just been hating on you all split, the game is about to hate on you at Worlds because you should have wished you didn't make Worlds because your players, even when they made the final, looked disconnected. They didn't look like they worked well together. So it's going to be really rough at Worlds, in my opinion. Like, they got to hope for a nice group. Anyway, this has become fucking LSE podcast. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Spencer Green, Whattathings, Pranogo, Matt Shakowski, Tobias Bernasconi, JDubs, Alexander Rao, Xinged, the Puyallup Tribe, Jensen Goh, Hades, Andreas Kroknes, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs I do. Do you want teasers? Do you want to see who the next guests are on my shows? Do you want to take part in an in-depth esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.